Oh, hi. How's it going? Good to hear, good to hear. Oh, how am I doing? Well, okay. So, on February 25th, 2022, YouTuber and friend of mine, Alex Carlson, who runs the channel Post Mesmeric, released a video entitled My First Time with Dark Souls, yes, in 2022. It's a largely summary based video detailing, well, his first time through Dark Souls. It's a good video, and I suggest you give it a watch. It gets to some really good points about the game that often get left out of the wider conversation, but mostly it's a very good breakdown of a single subjective experience with a game that, while well loved, remains divisive in its own particular myriad ways. Ever since watching it myself, I've been thinking a lot about the first time I played Dark Souls, all the way back in, gosh, it was probably 2014? It did not go well. There are more than a few friends of mine who can attest to just how bad it went. It was the perfect example of a rather mundane occurrence, but one that is interesting nonetheless. It was a game I bounced off of, a term that occupies a rather large space in the language of games. It's a handy way to say you didn't like something initially, and found therein a reason or reasons to not continue engaging with the something, usually applied in the context of video games. The great thing about the term, though, is that when something bounces, it tends to keep bouncing, at least for a little while, and so logically there's a chance I might bounce back to that something. Case in point, I went back to Dark Souls. Boy, did I ever. I didn't realize it until the question was posed not too long ago, as of the time of this writing, anyways, that it is to this day my top played game on Steam, and that's not including all of the time I've put into it on the Switch. The things that led to that initial bounce off, my first encounters with the game, became a big part of why I like it to this day. What started as obtuse became deep, what was complicated became vast, and what was difficult became rewarding, or at the very least interesting. These days, I don't just think back on Dark Souls fondly, it remains a notable and powerful lodestone of my enjoyment. It is a high watermark for what I look for in games, in fantasy, in world building, in what I want from an escapist experience. It has informed everything from my Dungeons and Dragons campaign up to the game that I imagine myself making one day. Needless to say, this game that I once declared to be a lost cause and incompatible with the way I enjoy things made something of a comeback. It's become a game I love for its own specific reasons. And so I have been thinking about other bounce offs of my career, if you will. There are plenty of games I have stopped playing before completion, and applying a single term to all of them felt a little reductive and failed to take into account why it is I left them in the way that I did. After all, there's a pretty clear difference between how I tend to like things. Chrono Trigger, Danganronpa, or Vampire Survivors are three of my favorite games, but there are pretty clear lines between them that say a lot about how these games are presented and how I want to engage with them. One of these is a game that I replay often to re-experience it as much as possible. One is a game I've played once and often reflect back on fondly, but would struggle to play again in its entirety, and the other is a game I turn on and play for about an hour at a time, anytime I need something to just do. So, after wrapping up the Tunic video, which was a very structured and purposeful play experience for me, give it a watch if you want to see what I'm up to, I spent some time just playing games without really focusing on anything particular. I was taking a bit of a break, and there just so happened to be a week of the Dota 2 Arlington Major on, and later the Malaysia Major, because this took a while, and a whole bunch of wrestling for me to catch up on, because apparently I'm into wrestling now. So why not go back and give out some second chances? Now, some of these I don't think can be rectified. For instance, it will take so much convincing for me to ever try StarCraft 2 again because of how much it pulls away from the raw experience of the first game, And Spelunky has already gotten multiple chances from me, and it didn't take. But some of them seemed like kind of a gimme. Like the bouncing off was pretty easily on my side of the interaction, and with a few adjustments, I could make it work. I bounced off of Hollow Knight because I had the bright idea to start it less than an hour after I finished 100%ing Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and so I lasted about 3 sittings before coming to the conclusion that I really needed a change of engagement. I bounced off of Prey because I was led to believe it was a horror game, which it really isn't, and thus my attempts to play it on my Twitch channel for a spooky stream game in October years back really landed flat. And I'm pretty sure I bounced off of Hyperlight Drifter because at the time I didn't have a controller that worked with a PC, and I don't know, can you imagine successfully getting into this on a mouse and keyboard? If you did, then bully for you, but that didn't play with me. And so, speaking as a person who really enjoys interrogating why I like and enjoy things like this, I thought maybe there was something to be gained by going back to these rather circumstantial dislikings and digging a little further into what playing these games had to offer. Not many games can hope to have an introduction as strong as Hyperlight Drifter. Even the films that this game is open about borrowing from, while powerful and beautiful in their own right, struggle to approach the wild and unforgiving heft of visual significance that is managed by an open-ended medium like games. There were more than a few moments that didn't ask, they required me to stop and just drink it in, let my interpretive mind fill in the blanks left by graphical fidelity, and just admire the beauty that this game is both capable of and which it achieves. The game is gorgeous, in a lot of ways visually second to none. This was my first experience with a hi-fi pixel graphics game back in the day, and it remains powerful even now, evoking quiet majesty and violent devastation alike. The dreamy wandering through a new unfamiliar place, the terrifying adventuring to heights unknown, and the shocking reality being dropped on you at a moment's notice is almost inescapably captivating. There's a distance between the player and game created by the lack of language and the sheer scale of what's before us that clearly and strongly identifies this game. It's hard to get it out of your head. I really struggled to focus on everyday tasks during periods of not engaging with the game, even if I wasn't even really that excited to play it. It felt more like I just wanted to be there. I began to reflect on this situation, with Hyperlight Drifter being a game that I more or less enjoy and want to see more of, that I actually find difficult to play. Not in terms of its difficulty, although that is a factor, but in how the controls seem like they're not quite up to snuff. I found them flighty and weird, prone to dropping inputs, and the special abilities you come by in the game were unreliable at best. After about an hour of play at any given time, I had to call it quits and leave it for the day, sometimes too, annoyingly subjecting myself to more unfocused drudgery until I could play it again. This game had a hold on me that I couldn't reconcile with the ways I was required to engage with it. I did revisit the game at one point, trying the mouse and keyboard controls a second time, and while I hear there are people who swear by this input method, it didn't take hold for me. But all the same, the game ended for me when I hit a wall, a boss more specifically, that exacerbated the specific problems I have with the game at large, and so I left this title in quiet respect. It had won me over. Even if I'm not finishing it at this time, I may never go back to it, but it will hold a piece of my attention, perhaps long enough to draw me back after enough time. And so I figured this little experiment I embarked on was going to give me something to really chew on, and thankfully, if nothing else, I can revel in how much I love Arcane Studios' 2017 iteration of Prey. Nothing is more apparent to me than the fact that my initial entry to this game was subpar at best. hoping to get some spooky fun times out of it for a Halloween stream years back, really fought with how much of a calm and cerebral game about creative problem solving it really is. Only minimal scares, as it were, combined with how much reading there is here that is purely supplemental to the material at hand, made for a dull offering, and kinda sad with my face cam all in the dark, ready for the jumps, spooks, and screams. No, I don't actually have any footage of this kicking around. And this being, so I'm told, an honest attempt at a return to the immersive sims of old, and my first experience with the genre to boot, yeah, the constant drive to keep things entertaining for the stream and to just converse with chat were not ideal circumstances for absorbing just what this game is trying to offer. To be fair, it's not like AEW Dynamite or OG versus Team Astro VODs are much better, but being able to take my time and ease myself into the situations presented by the game did wonders for my experience. I hadn't been this engrossed in a world and environment like this since probably BioShock, and honestly I'm suddenly kinda interested in revisiting that game now. There is an intricacy and intimacy in Prey that I find we are too often hard up for these days, or at least it is something I breeze right on by and I don't get enough of. The getting to know all of the characters through their D&D analog character sheets, using security tracking to find out where people met their final demise, or that they may still be alive, finding the little moments of entertainment people have eked out for themselves in their work life, their overbearing strategies at identifying what is or isn't a life-sucking monster in hiding. The fact that you can use Nerf guns that were all the rage among the staff of Talos 1 to be able to distract enemies and push buttons you can't reach for yourself is a great touch. It's exactly the kind of thing that works both as a piece of world building and mechanical engagement. These kinds of small strokes of genius, enough of which add up to being a game that is never starved for clever moments that pull you further and further into its world, is enough to carry me onwards, even through the parts of this game where the story really takes a rain check and nothing explicitly happens for a while. Now, if this is the truest return to an immersive sim we've gotten in like a decade or more, I must say I'm a little disappointed, as it does feel like, despite my attempt to steer away from it when possible, my character build was naturally falling into being a combat-focused one. That's not a deal breaker, it works for the most part, though the build of the game seems to be resisting that very thing, like a car that isn't steering properly and constantly needs to be kept in line. The limited access to ammunition and the somewhat clunky RPG-centered combat mechanics do offer this game a touch of the horror game feel, but in a really roundabout kind of way, even if most of the time a true moment of fright ends up in the very exhausting, much maligned, "you're dead, please try again" scenario. But all of that aside, I need to make it known that the degree to which I wanted to finish this game after starting it is pretty much the main reason this video took as long as it did to make. I walked into this project not requiring myself to finish the games of discussion, because I wanted to get this one turned around quick, and if I liked it well enough I could finish it on my own time. But I had to consciously stop myself playing more of Prey in order to get any actual work done, so I'll leave it at this game's real good. And lastly, we land on Hollow Knight. I will get this out of the way quickly by opening with, I knew they couldn't all be turnarounds, and oh, Hollow Knight. I feel a little caught out with this one because I totally see what there is to love about this game. I know so many people who seemingly can't get enough of it, and I don't hate this game. It just didn't do it for me. I am, to use the phrase, bouncing off of this game. If there was one starting point for these feelings, for me, it's got to be the pushback. Dying to a boss or just to an enemy whose pattern you're not tracking properly yet can push you back good and far. That's nothing new in the wider landscape, but getting back on track was a real challenge. It grinds particularly hard against the unforgiving nature of vertical platforming. Age-old game design, yes, but if I had a nickel for every misjudged or mistimed jump I've made over the years, putting huge stopgaps in progress throughout all of my days, I'd have my grocery bill covered for at least the next couple months. And so getting back on track is finicky at best, creating frustration that never really went away. There were several times that a challenge I stumbled into or an extended period of exploration ended badly, and then I would wake up on the last park bench I took a nap on. At that point, the last thing I wanted to do was attempt what I had just done again, even just because I felt that the time investment in getting back there was going to far outweigh the potential for enjoyment that I intuned was waiting for me during my first attempt. Not an issue for many, but I guess the next problem: the world in this game didn't really excite me the way I wanted it to. When I play a Metroidvania, I'm often first taken in by the environments and the breadth of weapons and abilities to make use of. Like I said, I don't think this is a bad game, but it didn't hit these points for me. The environments are beautiful and varied in their own way, but it's not an aesthetic that entices me. One style of underground dirt and fauna is not that different from another. The combat is tight and responsive, but I haven't found a versatility, the arsenal of weapons, abilities, or spells, or whatever that suits my desires. Ultimately, it's the small things that drag this down for me, and the lack of a promise of more kinda stops me outright. I'm not writing Hollow Knight off entirely. I'm sure I'm going to get any number of people telling me why I should go back to this, and by all means, go ahead. I want to know more about this game, but it feels, at this time, like something I will appreciate from a distance. But who knows? Maybe Silksong will turn me around when it finally gets here. So, what was the point of this? Why bother going back to these games? That is a question I'm asking myself in this moment, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is, if I'm being honest. In this day and age, where there are any number of things I can latch onto for enjoyment, why bother going back to something that didn't catch me? That kind of thing is never out of the question for me. I've been led to reevaluate things plenty of times by content creators that I follow. Maybe my first experiences planted some kind of a seed of interest I was always eventually going to go back to. Maybe there is a conformity angle. These are well-loved games, and maybe enough of my friends have chided me over the years for not engaging with them on the right level, so maybe I had to fix that. But I have a Steam library of over 800 games that are waiting to be played. Not to mention my GOG library, and the free games on Epic are starting to pile up. I have actual physical games on my shelf that I haven't even opened yet. I'm on 7, 8 if you count Nebula, distinct streaming services that I can't hope to keep up with. Heck, I have stacks of books that I should get excited about reading finally. But these games that I've revisited here, these bounce-offs, among other things in my life, come packaged with a weird anxiety that I think I'm coming to terms with in this moment. I used to like everything. Or at least I feel like I used to like everything. I mean, one of my favorite games is Donkey Kong 64, a game that I fully admit is a favorite probably because I played it at the right time. I don't like to admit that, because I really love this game, but once enough things were pointed out to me by its detractors, yeah, I can kind of see it. And I made a video with a fedora on my head explaining why DK64 is to this day one of my favorite games. I stand by that video, except for maybe the fedora, but I still have to recognize Donkey Kong 64 as a game that might be mired in confusing and frustrating design decisions. It's on a console that was known for catastrophic frame drops. Its exploration is split between 5 different characters whom you need to manage separately. It is pretty obviously padded in a lot of useless ways. It has the Beaver Bother minigame in it, and it was played on what is often seen as the worst controller in the history of gaming. But none of these things are problems for me, except for maybe Beaver Bother. I love this game. Not even in spite of these things, I just love this game. What scares me in light of this is the thought that if I had played DK64 for the first time today as an adult, I would probably have bounced off. Case in point, getting into Banjo-Kazooie later in life didn't work for me. Yeah, a big part of my problem was how different it was than DK64 on a granular level, but the magic didn't take hold for me. Because when you break through the problems that surround Donkey Kong 64, you can find a game bursting with creativity, clever level and environment design, funny and charming pieces of world building, a vast and exciting world to explore. Creepy Castle, Gloomy Galleon, and Frantic Factory are all fantastic 3D platformer levels that I have loved exploring and revisiting, and if I had not gotten into this game when I did, then I never would have seen any of them. And I bet Banjo-Kazooie has all of this also, but the magic didn't take hold. And at this point in my life, I will probably never experience the extent to which this is true. Okay, so when I started answering your question, it kind of just started without me knowing where it was going. At this point in the writing process, what I'm reading to you right now, I still don't fully know what I'm trying to get at. I don't have the slightest clue what I'm going to put over top of this for visuals, and I hope it turns out okay. But what I can tell you is that a lot of all of this has come to me pretty easily. Easier, I would say, than any of my last 6 or so videos have. And this is not a sign of end times for the channel. Now, more than ever, I feel like I'm in a creative groove that I want to ride for as long as it will last, whatever that means for a gaming-based video essay channel like mine. But I guess what I'm saying is this felt like something I had to say out loud before it went away, regardless of how it may or may not play with any kind of audience I have at this point. I live alone. I am not currently in a relationship, I am not a parent, and I have a day job that, while I'm thankful to have, well, I don't come here to talk about work. And while I would say I have a pretty healthy social life, I have family and friends pretty regularly available to me on or offline, there's still a lot of empty space I have to fill in my day-to-day. As such, I endeavor to stay interested in whatever I can be. I've been getting back into watching Pro Dota 2, and have been loving what the current OG lineup is pulling off this season. I've recently gotten into watching AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I'm having lots of fun digging into what I can get my hands on in that respect. And now, more than ever, I'm finding more and more music to add to my collection and lists of favorite artists and albums, more interesting YouTube channels to follow and absorb what they have to offer. I devour podcasts like I'm starving or something. But what if all of that interest I have to show is just performative? I'm not fooling myself. I am inundating myself with new music to listen to. I used to read every inch of the liner notes on new albums I got. I could tell you all of the track names and who was credited with writing each one. As things are now, there's no way I can properly absorb and internalize it all like that anymore. I enjoy watching these wrestling broadcasts and events, and I have dumb opinions on the dumb stuff that happens in them, which I hear is basically the entire point, but what if that's just novelty that might wear off eventually? I like watching Pro Dota, but I was never proficient enough in the game to fully know what was happening in the games that I myself was playing. And so if there was no commentary to these broadcasts, would I be able to properly convey to an uninitiated observer what any of this means? Sometimes I think about Donkey Kong 64 and I get a little worried, considering the alternate universe where I played it in my 20s, and all of my early days Angry Reviewer videos had me referring to this game that I love as actually just bad diarrhea garbage that fell out of a garbage truck's asshole on its way to the used diaper and garbage factory. I could very well have hated this game. And that's kind of weird to think about, right? It makes me wonder if I'm just desperate to enjoy things as much as I can right now, because what if I miss out on something while I'm still able to like it? What if my tastes change and I won't understand why or when it happens? What if things ultimately get grayer and less exciting as I get older? I hope I have a lot of life left to live, and I want to keep adding to and enriching the experience for myself however I can manage. But am I so riddled with imposter syndrome at this point that I can't even enjoy things without worrying that I'm doing it wrong? I don't want to have to think that in order to truly love and appreciate something, that I have to have first experienced it and have followed it since I was like 14 or something. In a lot of ways, this is the stuff that keeps me going, and I don't want that to come off as hyperbole. This kind of stuff really is what keeps me excited to wake up in the morning. The desire to share my experiences and commune with people over them is a big part of what drives me in life. In some pretty real ways, this channel that you're watching right now really is a manifestation of what it means for me to be awake. I tried leaving this channel behind. I tried not sharing the things that I love and how I enjoy them with people for nearly 2 years, and it really sucked. I have always thought to myself that my time is better spent trying to find reasons to enjoy something rather than search for things to not like about it. And so when I bounce off of something, when it occurs to me that a new and exciting opportunity to experience something isn't to my interest, suddenly I'm a little worried. What if I'm now at a point in my life when I can't break through the weird design decisions or massive frame drops or poorly built controllers? What if I'm not finding that deeper thing to latch onto, even if I think I am? What if the magic isn't going to take hold anymore? I think that worries me. Because Hollow Knight is an undeniably beautiful game. It's tight and well built. The fact that it was pretty much entirely put together by 2 people is worthy of endless praise in of itself. And yet, I don't really like it. I'm sure there's lots left here for me to see, but there's that nasty truth I turned away from earlier. There are plenty of other things I could do with my time, and I can't help but think this, because every time the game breaks my immersion or attachment, it doesn't really pull me back in that well. And so moving on is my responsibility, right? But I struggle with the idea that I am so willing to throw away one of these experiences for something else, untested and unproven, that I am instinctively so dismissive of someone's hard work and investment to make something amazing. Because Hollow Knight is amazing. I will plant that flag. The fact that anything like this ever gets finished is a miracle. I don't want to think about what it means when I am so easily able to lose interest. So, I know this isn't the first time I've done the cut to black reintroduction with a conversational tone, but it felt necessary here. Everything that I've just finished putting to video here is a concern I have, but obviously there comes a time to pull out of the spiral and let things fall into place. I think where a lot of this anxiety comes from is how I want to engage with these kinds of things. My gut response is that I want to dive first into something as though it's the only thing I can dive into for the time being. To really dig into and examine as much as I can and be exhaustive with how I experience it. But obviously that's not always possible, especially not anymore. Day jobs, personal projects, self-care, the things that I do to find fulfillment, mixed with less and less time and energy and a growing pool of things to observe and enjoy, make for the state I'm in now. I guess that's part of getting older. Thinking on all of this brings me back to Dark Souls. Both the game itself and Alex's video on it. Dark Souls is a game that is intimidating in its pure and natural state. It is meant to seem overwhelming, and I think it's fair to say that Dark Souls presents as an indifferent experience. If you are not gelling with the game, then go elsewhere, it seems to say. It almost invites you to bounce off of it, and I did. Many have. But Alex's video is a good reminder to approach things on your own terms. Find your own way to make it meaningful, and come to it when you can. I only played the game for the first time 3 years after its release, and was even later to actually find my way in and be able to take it up as something I would go on to finish and internalize. I only played the original Final Fantasy VII in like 2019 or something. I finally completed Riven more than a decade after first playing it and struggling to connect with it as a child. This very project brought me back to a new recent favorite game. I made a video on The Witness in 2021. I used to hate and resist any horror movie that crossed my path, but now they're some of my favorites. I somehow became a newly minted wrestling fan in my 30s. Heck, I finally watched Casablanca this summer. A new favorite film coming to me 80 years after it was made. I came to these things on my own terms. And I guess you could argue that's all I've ever done. How I arrive at the stories and music and images that I internalize and take with me is part of the story, part of how it all becomes meaningful to me, no matter when that happens. I just have to hope that I have the forethought to remind myself that even if I feel like I missed out on something, that doesn't make it off limits. Because in the end, after all of what I've been thinking through in this answer to your question, I can't wait to find the next thing to get excited about, however I get excited about it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a good sign. So, I think I'm doing all right. Thanks for hearing me out.